Well, hello everybody. Welcome to New Filmmakers LA Filmmaker Interviews, being produced in collaboration with Movie Maker magazine. Here we have with us today filmmaker Stuart Harmon, who has created the very powerful and thought-provoking Money Stone. Before we speak about your film, Stuart, we're going to watch a clip.
Okay.
And then we'll be back.
Mana baskula wo do ko no marka yo wet ki sila ko maninga kan ana do ri wanda papa
bo fa ana bakala bo hada ko ta ti jam ko bo bien fa
mama ko do yin ken school la ko on za nsuya papa to bonna o president nga to bona ka bona dawo ko duan
Can you give me a sense of, what it's about, a quick synopsis?
Sure. So the film is a coming-of-age story about two boys who are in Ghana, which is in West Africa, and they're both kind of trapped into this really dangerous world of gold mining, illegal gold mining. And so one of the boys ends up going back to school and the other one stays in the gold mines, and we kind of look at and follow their stories over time to see how they just deal with these circumstances. So it's kind of a real personal tale of these two boys and how they deal with it. And it's really a story about the human spirit and how they can get through these very difficult circumstances.
Can you describe in greater detail what this kind of mining looks like? What is it physically? Like, what do they have to do?
Sure. So a quarter of all the gold in the world comes from just individual people digging holes in the ground and pulling essentially gold out of the earth, which people don't really realize that. The gold that you have in your jewelry, it's coming from people just like you and me, not these big, you usually think of these big companies who are doing the gold mining, but there's actually this huge industry and economy in the world of individuals doing this called small scale mining. And it's a huge part of their livelihood. It's a great way to get out of poverty. It offers a lot of opportunities actually. And so Ghana has a very large population of people who are doing this, up to like 1 million people who are engaged in this kind of work. And it's a variety of different types of things. Some of it's just basic digging where you're actually following gold seams. Some of it's like panning, like the old school that you see in the Wild Wild West kind of stuff. And they're essentially pulling the gold out that's going on to the international market. It's kind of crazy to think about that, but there's a system through which they go through the government and they can sell the gold and it gets onto the market. And for them, it's like in Ghana specifically, it's a huge opportunity. The challenge they have in Ghana is that it's mostly criminalized. Most of the people who are allowed to do it legally are mining companies. And so they're forced to work in these really dangerous illegal situations because they can't build a business, they can't do it properly. And so that's where child labor comes into the picture. Because they don't have regulations, kids get sucked into this and they look at it as a way to try to help their families and that kind of thing.
So how did this story come to you?
Yeah, I was traveling in Ghana on a graduate school project actually, and I had just started researching, mining was a big topic that was going on there. And I started learning about these guys called the Galamsey, which are it's the term for the illegal miners there. And I started reaching out to journalists who had covered this before. I met some local people who were from the area where a lot of the mining takes place, and they just took me out to the areas where there was gold mining, and I kind of went spot to spot, meeting a bunch of different people, kind of talked about why I was interested in it. What drew me to it specifically was this kind of complexity of issues, where it's like on the surface it looks pretty awful. It's like these guys are risking their lives, it's really dangerous conditions, there's kids, there's just so many awful things about it. But on the flip side is there's a lot of potential positives out of it, where you can really lift yourself out of poverty in a country that doesn't, where people don't have a lot of opportunity. So I thought that complexity, there's like a tension there that I thought, oh, this would make a great story, is to find some kind of stories within this and then kind of follow that. I was just interested in the miners, and then I met Justice, which is one of our main characters, who's about 17 at the time. What drew me to him specifically was he was a bit different than the other guys. A lot of the guys were very rough and tumble, as you see in the film. He has this kind of yearning to be more, to like do something with his life, you know, and not that the other guys don't, but like he really like stayed away from any kind of like, you know, stuff that boys his age were doing. You know, they're kind of getting into trouble. There was a little bit of drugs, there was a little bit of sex. He was trying to stay away from that and be focused on working and earning and that kind of thing. So I thought that was fascinating, because this guy had quit school to do this, and he really thought he could turn his life around by doing this job. And we heard about this organization that was trying to pull the kids out and put them into school, and it's called AfriKids, and that's kind of how we were like, this would make a really interesting kind of, you know, it's an interesting opportunity to compare these two stories of like the kids who go back to school with some of the kids who decide to stay in. And we didn't want this to be an NGO film, you know, we wanted to be somewhat skeptical also of the people going back to school, because it's a tough thing when you walk away from this income generation, you know, and you see that in the film, like they can't, like there's moments where they don't have food, you know. It's a really tough decision to say, I'm going to go to school for 4, 5, 6, however long years, and walk away from that. So we really wanted to see that kind of tension between those two worlds. And you know, the film isn't like an activist film in that sense, and it's more of just kind of exploring this kind of conflict around the issue. So,
you know, I'm curious about, as a filmmaker going into this environment, and especially that criminal aspect of it. And there were times when you felt like it was kind of rough and tumble, a little bit scary. Did you ever feel in harm's way, or was that something that you took in consideration at all while you were there, or where you just felt safe and everything was cool?
Journalism is really big in Ghana, which is great. They have a lot of newspapers. They have a very big free press, which is fantastic. So that's a great baseline. I have reported in other countries where they don't have much of a free press, and it's much more difficult because you have a constant surveillance by police. You know, you have a lot of things. So you don't have that, which is good. The next step, though, is there's a lot of skepticism against the mining companies from these guys. So they thought I might have been like an undercover mining company person there to expose them or kind of like root out what they're doing. And so there was a lot of long conversations with different people that we had to meet. I always had someone local who I worked with to help negotiate those things, so that made a big difference. You know, the people were actually really warm and pretty understanding. I think the biggest danger was just the actual danger of the areas we were in. You know, I mean, there was mercury. We only mentioned it briefly, but there was like, they just put mercury all over the place. They just toss it out, you know, into the water source. It's just all over the place. Burn it as well. And so it's really those conditions are the the biggest challenge. And then there was some cultural stuff, like certain areas where, you know, the chiefs still have a very big role, and so like you have to make sure that the chiefs know that you're there filming. Sometimes you have to bring them a gift, something like that. There's some traditions around that.
You come from journalism, as you just mentioned, so I'm just wondering what the relationship is between your filmmaking and your journalism, how the two hats inform each other.
Yeah, it's quite different, but I mean, the good thing is it really helps you hone your craft in terms of just basic storytelling. I mean, journalism and television, there's tools and formats and things to help you just simply tell your story. Learning how to get access is a big part of certain types of films, especially investigative pieces. You know, access is always difficult, and so you have to learn some tricks, or not so much tricks, but like you have to learn how to work with people to make sure that you can get access to what you're trying to do. So I think it really helps from that perspective of giving you some just experience. The other side of it is the style is just completely different. You know, when you're going into making a film, there's no format. I mean, you can totally try to knock off one of Werner Herzog's films, but it's going to probably be terrible if you try to narrate it, because you're not going to sound like Werner Herzog. Like there's no set plan, whereas like a news broadcast has this set plan. You have 3 minutes, you have you know, those
Wow.
kind of things. The beauty of working in like television and journalism is you can be a freelancer, and so you can get a chance to travel and go to these places and then potentially do your own work, kind of piggybacking on that, which is really cool. So like,
That
you know,
kind of happened here, right? Because you were there
yeah,
and you
exactly.
found
That's
out
true. Yeah. And I got access to a mining company and wrote a article for someone. Like someone made me their stringer essentially, and I wrote them an article, and then I got access to film with this mining company people. So there's a way to kind of do both at the same time and help, you know, fund your project and get access to these places. So there's, I think it's really helpful in that sense. And then you get to meet a lot of people who also love to do this craft. They're filmmakers as well who work in television and film, and so you can team up with them and find collaborators too. So,
you know, it's easy for us to come from our, you know, Western privileged lives and, you know, go into these places where, you know, they have very different customs, very different ways of doing things, and sort of judge it. Or, and I thought you did a good job of bringing us close into it in a way without making it, exploiting it for anything, but just having, so was that something you were conscious of?
yeah, very much so. You have a responsibility, especially as a white man, walking into these environments and saying, how do you tell their stories, but in a way that's like them telling their stories and not you trying to hijack that. I mean, you know, just look over the last couple of years, we've had these conversations about how do you tell stories in a way that honors them, and especially as, you know, white men have a long, poor history of telling people's stories in a proper way. So,
Yep.
you know, I really didn't want to be a voyeur in this world. You know, it's a balance too, because you do want to also show the conditions that they're under. And, you know, even Justice was not proud actually of like the conditions he was working in. He actually, I have interviews with him where he talked about hating being
And his
dirty.
father.
And his father too, like he was embarrassed by his father.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't want, you know, he had a dignity. And so I think you have to just make sure that you're expressing that in the way they feel about that through the way you edit it. And it's a tough
I know
thing.
exactly
It's
what you
not
mean.
it's not like a conscious thing, but I think it's really important because everybody wants dignity. It doesn't matter where you are. So I wanted just to show the people as they are, and they go through the same things we do. And I was more curious too about the family dynamics. I thought that was really interesting, is that they have the same father-son kind of challenges any father and son has, you know, anywhere in the world.
And what's up for you next?
Yeah, so I have several projects that I'm developing. I've got a television kind of series, actually two of them that I'm trying to develop with a couple of colleagues. This is where, again, it's great to meet people in the field and work in the field, because then you can find collaborators. So I've got a very renowned showrunner that I'm working with to try to push out this story of this kind of scam artist. A few other stuff. I'm very interested in criminal justice reform in America, and so looking at different ways to kind of attack that. And yeah, a couple of other things lingering here and there. I want to do some series of shorts as well, because the feature length is such a mountain to produce. So
Yeah.
I'm looking to do some shorter projects too,
Oh,
which I'm
yeah.
excited about.
Cool. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for creating such a thought-provoking and riveting film.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching.